Isabella gets the watch. Mom's voice cut through the quiet funeral home reception like a knife. I looked up from my untouched plate of sandwiches, certain I'd misheard her. Dad had been gone for only 3 days. We just buried him that morning. The watch, his vintage 1960 Omega Seamaster, had been on his wrist every single day for as long as I could remember. He'd promised it to me. Not just casually, but specifically, repeatedly, throughout my entire childhood. "When I'm gone, Gwen, this watch goes to you," he'd said 100 times while teaching me about responsibility, about family legacy, about keeping promises. Now Mom stood in the corner of the room talking to my sister Isabella, and I watched as she unclasped the watch from Dad's personal effects bag. She handed it to Isabella, who smiled and immediately put it on her wrist. It looked ridiculous, too large, sliding around on her thin arm. She'd never cared about that watch. She'd never asked Dad about it, never shown the slightest interest in his stories about buying it with his first real paycheck. My name is Gwendolyn Parker, though everyone calls me Gwen. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a history teacher at Roosevelt High School in Cincinnati. Dad and I had always been close, bonded by our love of history, old things, and the stories they carried. Isabella is my older sister by 4 years. She's a real estate agent who lives 2 hours away in Columbus. She visits maybe 3 times a year, always with some excuse about how busy she is. I saw her maybe 6 times in the last 2 years of Dad's life, even when he got sick. Even when the cancer got bad and he could barely get out of bed. I was there every week, sometimes every day toward the end. I'd take leave from school, grade papers in his hospital room, read to him when he was too tired to hold a book. Isabella sent flowers twice and a fruit basket once. Now she wore his watch, and Mom acted like this was perfectly normal. I walked over to them, my heart pounding. "Mom, Dad promised me that watch." Mom's face hardened. "Your sister is the oldest. It's appropriate that she receives your father's most valuable possession." "It's not about value. Dad specifically said he wanted me to have it. He told me that my whole life." Isabella examined the watch on her wrist, turning it in the light. "It's beautiful. I had no idea Dad had such good taste." She didn't even know what kind of watch it was. I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. "Mom, please, this isn't right. The decision is made, Gwendolyn. Don't make a scene at your father's funeral." Her voice was cold, final. I looked around the room at relatives and family friends, all carefully pretending not to notice our conversation. No one would support me. No one ever did when it came to Mom and Isabella. They'd always been a unit, the two of them against me. I left the funeral home early, unable to watch Isabella showing off Dad's watch to relatives who commented on how nice it looked on her. At home in my small apartment, I sat on the couch and finally let myself cry. Not just for losing Dad, but for this final betrayal. The watch wasn't just a watch. It represented every conversation Dad and I had shared, every moment he'd taught me about integrity and keeping your word. He'd wound it every morning, a ritual I'd watched thousands of times. "Mechanical watches need care, Gwen," he'd say. "Like relationships, you have to tend to them every day or they stop working." I'd planned to wind that watch every morning for the rest of my life, keeping Dad's memory alive in that small daily act. Now Isabella had it, and she probably didn't even know it needed winding. She'd wear it until it stopped, then put it in a drawer somewhere and forget about it. The next morning, I drove to Mom's house. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with anger and grief. I needed to try one more time to make her understand. Mom lived in the same house where Isabella and I grew up, a modest ranch-style home in a quiet suburb. Dad's car was still in the driveway. Seeing it made my chest tight. Mom answered the door in her bathrobe, looking exhausted. "Gwen, it's early. We need to talk about the watch." She sighed and let me in. The house smelled like coffee and something else, something stale and sad. "There's nothing to discuss. I made my decision." "But why? You know Dad promised it to me. You were there for some of those conversations." Mom poured herself coffee, not offering me any. "Your sister has had a harder life than you, Gwendolyn. Her divorce, her struggles with money, she deserves something valuable. So you're giving her Dad's watch because you feel sorry for her." Mom's face flushed red. "Don't take that tone with me. I'm your mother and I decide how your father's things get distributed. Dad should have decided. He did decide. He wanted me to have it." "Well, your father isn't here anymore, is he?" The words hung in the air between us, cruel and final. I felt like she'd slapped me. "I can't believe you're doing this." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. "Gwendolyn, wait." Mom's voice softened slightly. I know you're upset, but you have to understand. Isabella needs this more than you do. You have your teaching job, your stable life. She needs to know she's valued, that she matters. And I don't. The question came out smaller than I intended. Mom didn't answer, which was answer enough. I left without saying goodbye. On the drive home, I called my Uncle Raymond, Dad's younger brother. If anyone would understand, it would be him. He answered on the third ring. "Gwen, sweetheart, how are you holding up?" I explained everything to Uncle Raymond. The watch, the promise, Mom's decision to give it to Isabella instead. He listened quietly, then sighed deeply. "Your dad talked to me about that watch a month before he died. He was worried something like this might happen." My heart jumped. "What did he say?" "He said he'd told you it was yours, but he was concerned your mother might override his wishes. He'd been too weak to change his will or make anything official. The cancer moved so fast at the end." Uncle Raymond paused. "He asked me to look out for you, to make sure you knew how much he loved you." Tears streamed down my face as I drove. "Did he say anything else?" "He said the watch had more meaning than anyone knew, that you'd understand its value because you paid attention. Those were his exact words. You paid attention." We talked for a few more minutes before I had to pull over because I was crying too hard to see the road clearly. A week passed. I threw myself into work, preparing lessons and grading papers late into the night to avoid thinking about Dad, about the watch, about how Isabella had won again. She'd always been Mom's favorite. The pretty one, the charming one. The one who could do no wrong even when she was doing everything wrong. I was the serious one, the boring one, the one who studied too much and didn't have enough friends. When Isabella got divorced after cheating on her husband, Mom blamed the husband for not appreciating her enough. When Isabella quit 3 different jobs in 2 years, Mom said she was still finding her path. Nothing was ever Isabella's fault. Meanwhile, I'd worked hard, built a career, lived responsibly, and somehow that made me less deserving of the one thing Dad had promised me. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Isabella. I almost didn't answer. "Gwen, hey, I need a favor." Of course she did. "What kind of favor?" My voice came out flat. "I'm meeting a client tomorrow and I want to wear Dad's watch, but it stopped working. Do you know anything about fixing watches?" I closed my eyes. Dad's watch had stopped because Isabella hadn't wound it, just like I'd predicted. "It's a mechanical watch, Isabella. You have to wind it every day." "Oh, I didn't know that. Can you just tell me how to fix it?" Every instinct told me to say no, to let her figure it out herself. But the watch was Dad's and I couldn't let it sit broken. "There's a watch repair shop on Main Street called Timeless Treasures. Take it there. Ask for Howard. Tell him it belonged to Martin Parker and needs servicing." "Martin Parker, who's that?" I felt my jaw clench. "That's Dad's name, Isabella, our father's name." She laughed awkwardly. "Right, of course. Sorry, I'm distracted with work stuff. Thanks, Gwen." She hung up before I could respond. She didn't even know Dad's full name. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the watch sitting unwound, probably in Isabella's messy apartment somewhere. Dad had been so careful with it. He'd had it serviced every 2 years like clockwork. He'd kept it in a special wooden box when he wasn't wearing it. The thought of Isabella treating it carelessly made me furious. I called Uncle Raymond again. "She doesn't even know how to wind it. She let it stop." "That's unfortunate, but not surprising." Isabella never paid attention to the details. He paused. "Have you thought about what your dad said, about the watch having more meaning than anyone knew?" "I've thought about it constantly. I don't know what he meant." "Your father was a careful man, Gwen. He didn't say things without purpose. Maybe you should examine the watch yourself if you get the chance." His words stuck with me after we hung up. What had Dad meant? The watch was valuable, sure, but not extremely so. Maybe $1,500 in good condition. What other meaning could it have? 2 days later, Isabella called again. "Hey, so I took the watch to that repair place you mentioned. The guy, Howard, he was super weird about it." I set down the book I'd been reading. "Weird how?" "He kept asking all these questions about Dad. When he died, how long he'd owned the watch, whether Dad had mentioned anything about it. It was creepy, honestly." My pulse quickened. "What did you tell him?" "That Dad just died and the watch was mine now." Then Howard said he needed to keep it for a few days to service it properly. He gave me this long explanation about mechanical movements and lubrication that I totally didn't understand. Isabella laughed. "Anyway, he should be done by Friday. I just wanted to let you know in case you were worried about it or whatever." After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Why would Howard ask all those questions? Dad had been taking that watch to Howard for servicing for over 20 years. Howard knew exactly whose watch it was. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Wednesday evening, I drove to Timeless Treasures. The shop was in an old brick building downtown, wedged between a coffee shop and a bookstore. A bell chimed when I walked in. Howard stood behind the counter, a magnifying loupe strapped to his head as he worked on a tiny watch movement. He was maybe 70, with kind eyes and steady hands. "Be with you in just a moment," he said without looking up. When he finally set down his tools and looked at me, recognition flashed across his face. "Gwendolyn, I wondered if you'd come. You know who I am? Your father brought you here many times when you were younger. You always asked questions about how watches worked. Martin was proud of your curiosity." Howard's expression turned serious. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." "Thank you. I'm here about his watch. My sister brought it in." "Yes, the Omega Seamaster." Howard hesitated. "I told your sister I needed time to service it, but that wasn't entirely true." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" Howard glanced toward the front window, then gestured for me to follow him to the back of the shop. The workspace was crowded with tools, tiny parts, and watches in various states of disassembly. He picked up Dad's watch from a velvet cloth on the workbench. "When your sister brought this in, I examined it like I always did for your father. But this time, I noticed something I'd never seen before." He turned the watch over and showed me the case back. It looked normal to me, the Omega logo and serial number engraved in the steel. "I don't see anything unusual. Look closer. Here." Howard pointed to a tiny seam along the edge of the case back, so fine I could barely see it. "This watch has a false back, a hidden compartment. I've been repairing watches for 50 years, and I've only seen this kind of modification a handful of times." My hands went numb. "A hidden compartment? Why would Dad's watch have that?" Howard set the watch down carefully. "I don't know, but I wanted to talk to you before opening it. Your father specifically mentioned you in his last visit here about 3 months ago. He said if anything happened to him, I should make sure you got the watch. He said you were the only one who would understand what it meant." Tears pricked my eyes. "He tried to give it to me. My mom gave it to my sister instead." "I see." Howard's expression darkened. "Your sister has no idea about the compartment." "I didn't mention it to her. Can we open it now?" My voice came out as almost a whisper. Howard picked up a specialized tool, something thin and precise. "Are you sure? Whatever is inside, your father clearly intended it to be private." "I'm sure." I watched as Howard carefully worked the tool around the edge of the case back. It took several minutes of patient effort. Finally, the false back separated from the real case back with a soft click. Underneath was a small hollow space, maybe a 1/4 inch deep. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Howard handed me the paper without a word. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was Dad's, but younger, less steady than I remembered. The ink had faded to brown. The note was dated October 15, 1985, 37 years ago. "To whoever finds this, my name is Martin Parker. I'm 25 years old. I bought this watch today with money I've saved for 2 years. I'm writing this note because I need to tell someone the truth, even if no one ever reads it. 3 months ago, I witnessed a crime. I saw my supervisor at Hendricks Manufacturing, a man named Clayton Morse, taking bribes from contractors. I recorded one of their conversations on a tape recorder I borrowed from a friend. I gave the tape to the police." I stopped reading, looking up at Howard. "Dad worked at Hendricks Manufacturing when he was young. He never talked about it much." "Keep reading," Howard said gently. I looked back down at the letter. "The police told me the tape wasn't enough evidence without more witnesses. They said Clayton Morse had connections, that charges probably wouldn't stick. They were right. The investigation went nowhere. But Clayton Morse figured out I was the one who reported him. He threatened me. Told me accidents happen to people who don't mind their own business. I'm scared. I have a girlfriend, Beverly, who I want to marry someday. I don't want her in danger because of me. So I'm documenting everything here, in this watch I saved for so long. If anything happens to me, maybe someone will find this and know the truth. The original tape recording is in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box number 847. The key is hidden in my apartment, inside the cover of my copy of The Great Gatsby. Clayton Morse took bribes totaling at least $200,000 between March and September 1985. The contractors were Hanson Brothers Construction. I have dates, amounts, everything documented. The letter continued with more details, listing specific dates and dollar amounts describing meetings Dad had witnessed. At the bottom, he'd signed his full name. I read it twice, my mind reeling. Howard, did you know about any of this? No, your father never mentioned it, but it explains something that always puzzled me. Howard pulled out a worn ledger book from a drawer. Your father brought that watch here for the first time in January 1986. He asked me to add the false back compartment. He said it was for something important, something he needed to keep safe but hidden. I did the work without asking questions. That was his business, not mine. I stared at the letter in my hands. Clayton Morse. I've heard that name before. He owned Hendricks Manufacturing for 30 years before retiring. Big house on the hill, respected in the community. He died about 5 years ago, if I remember correctly. Did Dad ever talk about him? Never. Not once in all the years I knew your father. I left Timeless Treasures with the letter and the watch. Howard had helped me close the false back compartment again, sealing it as if it had never been opened. What are you going to do? He'd asked before I left. I don't know yet. But as I drove home, a plan started forming in my mind. Dad had hidden this letter for 37 years. He'd kept it secret through marriage, through raising 2 daughters, through his entire life. Why? If Clayton Morse was dead, the danger was gone. Unless it wasn't. I stopped at home long enough to grab my laptop, then drove to the public library. I needed to research Clayton Morse, Hendricks Manufacturing, and what happened in 1985. The library's newspaper archives went back decades, all digitized. I started searching, and within an hour, I'd found several articles about Hendricks Manufacturing from the mid-1980s. There was a brief mention of a police investigation into financial irregularities that went nowhere. But there was something else, too. An article from November 1985 caught my attention. Local whistleblower dies in hit-and-run accident. I clicked on it with shaking hands. Thomas Brennan, 29, was killed yesterday evening when a car struck him while he was walking home from work. Brennan was an accountant at Hendricks Manufacturing. Police say the driver fled the scene. Brennan had recently been cooperating with investigators looking into financial irregularities at the company. The investigation has now been closed due to lack of evidence. Thomas Brennan, another whistleblower, he died just a month after Dad made that recording. My stomach turned cold. Dad must have known about Thomas Brennan's death. That must have been why he hid the evidence and never spoke about it again. He'd been terrified the same thing would happen to him. I kept searching and found more. Clayton Morse had a son, Philip Morse, who now ran Morse Industries, the company that had bought out Hendricks Manufacturing in the 1990s. Philip was wealthy, connected, and sat on the boards of half a dozen local companies. The next morning, I called Uncle Raymond and told him everything. The hidden compartment, the letter, the story about Clayton Morse and the bribes. He was silent for a long moment after I finished. Gwen, this is serious. If what your father documented was true, and if people were willing to kill to cover it up back then. I know, but Clayton Morse is dead. It's been 37 years. His son isn't dead. And if this became public, it could destroy the family's reputation, maybe even have legal implications depending on what else they were hiding. Uncle Raymond's voice was tense. You need to be very careful with this information. What should I do? First, we need to find out if that safety deposit box still exists. If the original tape recording is still there, that's evidence of a crime. Even if the statute of limitations has passed, this could matter. I spent the rest of the day thinking about my options. Should I go to the police, publish the story somehow, or keep the secret like Dad had done? By evening, I'd made a decision. I called Isabella. I need the watch back. What? Why? She sounded annoyed. It's mine. Mom gave it to me. I know, but I want to make you an offer. I'll give you $2,000 for it. That's more than it's worth. Isabella was quiet for a moment. Why do you want it so badly? It was Dad's. It means something to me. I kept my voice steady. $2,000, Isabella. You could use the money, right? Actually, I could. I have a credit card payment due next week. Of course she did. So we have a deal. I guess, but I haven't picked it up from the repair shop yet. It won't be ready until Friday. I'll pick it up. Just text me that it's okay for Howard to release it to me. After a pause, she agreed. I had the watch, or I would soon. Now I needed to find that safety deposit box and figure out what to do with 37-year-old evidence of corruption and possible murder. Friday morning, I went to Timeless Treasures. Isabella had texted Howard her permission, and he had the watch ready in its original box. Did you decide what to do about the letter? He asked as he handed it to me. I'm still figuring it out. But thank you for telling me about it. If you'd given the watch to Isabella without saying anything, I never would have known. Your father trusted you with this secret, even if he didn't tell you directly. That means something. I drove straight from the watch shop to First National Bank. Inside, I asked to speak with someone about old safety deposit boxes. A young woman named Teresa led me to an office. I'm trying to find out if a safety deposit box my father rented in 1985 still exists. The number would be 847. Teresa typed on her computer, her expression neutral. Then her eyebrows rose. That box does still exist. It's listed under Martin Parker. But there's a note here that it hasn't been accessed since 1986. Can I access it? My father died recently. Do you have documentation proving you're his heir? I'd brought Dad's death certificate and my birth certificate, showing I was his daughter. Teresa reviewed them carefully, made some phone calls, and finally nodded. Normally there's a process for this, but since your father is deceased and you're his daughter, we can grant access. However, if the box rental fees haven't been paid, there may be a balance due. She checked her computer again. Actually, it shows the fees were prepaid through 2030. Your father paid for 50 years in advance back in 1980. 50 years. Dad had planned for this box to exist long after he was gone. Teresa led me to the vault, a massive metal door that required 2 keys to open. Inside was a room lined with small metal doors, each one a deposit box. She found 847 and used the bank's master key. "I'll give you privacy," she said, leaving me alone. My hands shook as I opened the small metal door and pulled out the box. It was lightweight, almost empty. Inside was a cassette tape in a clear plastic case and a sealed envelope. I took the tape and envelope to a private viewing room the bank provided. The envelope was addressed to Gwendolyn, if you're reading this. My breath caught. Dad had written my name on this envelope 37 years ago, 10 years before I was even born. I opened it carefully. Inside was another letter in Dad's handwriting, but this one was recent, the ink fresh. It was dated just 2 months before he died. "Dear Gwen, if you're reading this, you found the watch's secret and you found this box. I'm proud of you. I always knew you were the one who paid attention, who asked questions, who wanted to understand the whole story. The tape in this box is evidence of crimes committed by Clayton Morse in 1985. I witnessed those crimes and I tried to report them. Another man who tried to report them, Thomas Brennan, died. I was scared, so I hid the evidence and stayed quiet for 37 years. I built a life, married your mother, had you and your sister. I told myself the secret was buried and should stay buried." The letter continued. "But lately I've been thinking about Thomas Brennan. He died for trying to do the right thing, and I honored his courage by staying silent and hiding. That was wrong. I'm giving this to you because I trust you to decide what to do with it. The truth matters, Gwen, justice matters, but so does safety. Clayton Morse is dead now, but his family still has power and money. If you expose this, there may be consequences. I can't tell you what choice to make. I can only tell you that I love you, that I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to face this myself, and that whatever you decide, I'll be proud of you. The watch was always meant for you, not because it's valuable, but because you're the keeper of our family's true story now. Be careful. Be brave. Be the person I always knew you were. Love, Dad." I sat in that small room for a long time, holding Dad's letter and the tape that contained evidence of secrets that had shaped our entire family's life. Outside, Isabella was walking around with $2,000 she didn't earn, probably already planning how to spend it. Mom was at home, probably not thinking about me at all. But Dad had thought about me. He'd planned for this moment before I was even born. He'd trusted me with the truth. I put the tape and both letters back in the safety deposit box. I wasn't ready to decide what to do with them yet, but I had Dad's watch back where it belonged, on my wrist. And I finally understood what he'd meant about keeping promises and tending to relationships. Some secrets needed time to surface. Some truths needed the right person to tell them. I wound the watch carefully, feeling the familiar resistance of the mainspring tightening. The second hand started moving again, keeping time, keeping faith, keeping Dad's memory alive. Whatever I decided to do with his secret, I would do it the right way, the way he'd taught me. With patience, with attention to detail, and with the courage to face hard truths. For now, that was enough.